Chapter 1, The Last Breath. I can still smell the eucalyptus and wet earth that soaked into my black dress that day. It was October, and the fine rain falling over the cemetery seemed to wash not only the dust from the leaves, but also the last hope I had of understanding my father. Colonel Eduardo Santana had died as he lived, suddenly, without warning, leaving orders that no one would dare question. The heart attack took him on a Tuesday morning, while he was inspecting the coffee plantations at Santa Clara Farm. 40 years building an agribusiness empire, and it all ended among the coffee plants he loved so much. I, Isabella Santana, at 25 years old, found myself orphaned and prisoner of a legacy I never fully understood. My mother, Letitia, cried discreetly beside me, but I knew her tears were more of relief than sadness. Living with Eduardo Santana was like living with a hurricane, impressive, powerful, but devastating for those who were close. The reading of the will is tomorrow, murmured Dr. Enrique, the family lawyer, approaching us after the burial. At 2 in the afternoon, at the office. I nodded mechanically. I expected to inherit half the assets, the other half would naturally go to my mother. We were the only direct heirs, after all. Or at least that's what I thought. That night, alone in my room in the main house of the farm, I looked out the window at the field stretching to the horizon. All of that would be mine. The responsibility scared me more than it excited me. Dad always said I didn't have the firm hand for business, that I was too sensitive to command workers and make difficult decisions. How wrong I was about everything. Chapter 2, The Devastating Revelation. Dr. Enrique's office smelled of old leather and letterhead paper. Mom and I sat in the burgundy velvet armchairs, waiting to hear what we already imagined we knew. Beside us, inexplicably, was Ricardo Mendonça, my fiancé of 2 years, chosen by my mother for his adequate social position and fortune compatible with ours. Colonel Eduardo's will is peculiar, Dr. Enrique began, adjusting his glasses. He was very specific in his provisions. Mom shifted in her chair, impatient. Enrique, please. We've been family for 30 years. You can speak directly. The lawyer cleared his throat. Dona Letitia will inherit 20% of the assets and the city house. Isabella. He looked at me with a strange expression, will inherit 25% of the assets, subject to one condition. What condition? I asked, feeling a chill in my stomach. Marriage. Within 30 days. To the person specified in the will. Ricardo straightened in his chair, smiling. Well, that won't be a problem. We've been engaged for 2 years already. Dr. Enrique shook his head slowly. No, sir. The marriage must be with Miguel Santos, farm worker, who will inherit the remaining 55% of the assets. The silence that followed was so dense I could hear my heart beating in my ears. Mom turned pale as if she had seen a ghost. Ricardo turned red with rage. And I simply couldn't process what I had just heard. This is impossible, Mom whispered. Eduardo wouldn't do this. Not with a farm hand. Miguel Santos is not just any farm hand, Dr. Enrique continued, consulting his papers. He is an agricultural engineer graduated from the Federal University, has worked on the farm for 5 years as technical administrator, and according to the will, has proven to be the son Eduardo always wanted to have. The words hit me like a slap. The son he always wanted to have. I, who throughout my life tried to win my father's approval, now discovered that he had found in a stranger the heir of his dreams. And if she doesn't marry? Ricardo asked, his voice tense. Then Miguel Santos will inherit everything. Isabella will be left with only a small monthly pension. Chapter 3, The First Encounter. 3 days passed before I had the courage to look for Miguel Santos. 3 days of fights with Mom, who refused to accept the humiliation of seeing her daughter marry a manual laborer. 3 days avoiding Ricardo, who alternated between fury and attempts to convince me to ignore the will and run away with him. But I needed to see this man with my own eyes. I needed to understand what Dad had seen in him. I found Miguel in the farm's administrative office, a simple brick building behind the main house. He was leaning over maps and spreadsheets, wearing reading glasses that made him look older than his, I discovered later, 28 years. When he looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, something changed in his expression. It wasn't deference or nervousness, as I expected from an employee seeing the boss's daughter. It was recognition. As if he already knew exactly who I was, far beyond the obvious. Miss Isabella. He stood up, removing his glasses. I was expecting you. Miguel Santos was handsome in a way that caught me off guard. He didn't have the artificial beauty of the men in my social circle, but a natural masculinity, sculpted by work and sun. Tan skin, brown hair with golden strands, green eyes that seemed to see through me. You knew, I said, not as a question, but as a statement. About the will. I knew. He didn't try to deny or apologize. Your father told me 3 months ago. He said he was having health problems and needed to resolve pending matters. Pending matters? My voice came out higher than I intended. I'm a pending matter. Miguel studied me for a long moment before responding. You are much more than that, Isabella. Much more than your father told me, and he talked about you constantly. Something in the way he said my name, not Miss Isabella, just Isabella, made my stomach contract. There was intimacy in that tone, as if he had known me for years. Why did you accept? I asked. Why did you agree to this farce? He walked to the window, looking out at the fields. Because your father asked me to protect you. And because. He hesitated, because there are things you need to know about your family. Things that only I can tell you. What things? Miguel turned to me, and I saw something painful in his eyes. Not here. Not now. If you really want to know the truth about Eduardo Santana, meet me tonight. 8 o'clock on the porch of the old house. The old house was an abandoned colonial building on the property, where my great-grandparents had lived decades ago. No one had been there for years. Why should I trust you? Because, he said, putting his glasses back on and returning to his papers, I'm the only person on this farm who has nothing to gain by lying to you. Chapter 4, Secrets in the Old House. The night was clear, with a full moon illuminating the stone path that led to the old house. I arrived first, my heart beating irregularly. I didn't know if from fear or expectation. The wooden porch creaked under my feet, and for a moment I felt like a character in a Gothic novel, about to discover dark family secrets. Miguel appeared punctually at 8, bringing a thermos and 2 cups. Coffee, he explained, serving the steaming liquid. I thought you might need it. To hear the terrible secrets of the Santana family. I tried to sound sarcastic, but my voice trembled. To hear about your brother. The cup almost slipped from my hands. My what? Miguel sat in the rocking chair beside me, his large hands wrapping around the cup, as if he needed the warmth to find courage. You had a twin brother, Isabella. His name was Gabriel. The world spun around me. I tried to process the words, but they seemed to come from another dimension. That's impossible. I was always an only child. You were born premature. Gabriel was very sick, with serious heart problems. The doctors said he wouldn't live long. Miguel paused, studying my reaction. Your father made a decision. Officially, Gabriel died at 3 months. In reality, he was given up for adoption to a simple family who could better care for a special child. Tears began to roll down my face without me realizing it. Why would Dad do that? Because he was ashamed. A sick child didn't match the image of strength that Eduardo Santana wanted to project. And because. Miguel hesitated again, because your mother fell into deep depression after childbirth and refused to accept Gabriel's condition. And you know this how? Miguel stood up, walking to the porch railing. Because the family that adopted Gabriel were my parents, Isabella. Gabriel Santos was my adoptive brother. Your twin brother. If I thought I had already received the biggest shock of my life, I was wrong. The revelation hit me like lightning, illuminating and destroying everything at the same time. Gabriel died at 18, Miguel continued, his voice choked. Heart problems, as the doctors predicted. But before dying, he made me promise that I would come work at Santa Clara Farm. That I would take care of the sister he never got to meet. That's why you're here, I whispered. That's why Dad trusted you so much. Eduardo discovered who I was in the second year I worked here. At first he was furious, then I think he saw in me a way to redeem himself. A chance to honor the memory of the son he abandoned. Chapter 5, The Weight of Truth. I spent the entire night on the porch of the old house, crying in Miguel's arms. The man I discovered was much more than a stranger. He told me about Gabriel, how intelligent he was despite his limitations, how he talked about me constantly, imagining what it would be like to have a sister. How he made Miguel promise to protect me, even without knowing me. He had a photo of you, Miguel said, showing me a worn wallet. A high school graduation photo that your father had given him. Gabriel always carried it. I looked at the photo, me, at 17, smiling innocently at the camera. On the back in Dad's handwriting, for Gabriel, with love from the father who always loved him. Dad never stopped loving Gabriel, I realized, the pieces finally falling into place. That's why he left you the inheritance. You're what's left of the son he lost. And you're the daughter he wanted to protect. The will isn't a punishment, Isabella. It's the way he found to ensure you'd be cared for by someone he trusts completely. In the following days, everything changed. I saw Miguel with different eyes, not as a stranger my father had chosen for me, but as someone who carried pieces of my own story. We began meeting regularly. He showed me Gabriel's books, the letters my brother had written imagining our family reunited, the plans he had for the future before the disease progressed. And at some point, between tears and laughter, between shared secrets and comfortable silences, I fell in love with Miguel Santos. Chapter 6, The Conflict of the Heart. You've completely lost your mind, Mom screamed, when I told her about Gabriel, and about my feelings for Miguel. That story is his invention to manipulate you. How can you be so naive? It's not an invention, Mom. I saw the photos, Dad's letters. Photos can be falsified. Letters can be forged. Letitia paced back and forth in the room, gesticulating dramatically. That man is involving you to steal our fortune. Our fortune? I laughed bitterly. What fortune, Mom? You're going to inherit 20%. I get 25, only if I marry him. If I don't marry, I'm left with just a pension. Then marry him and divorce later. Marry on paper, take the money, and then get rid of him. The suggestion shocked me more than it should have. And Ricardo? Ricardo will wait. He loves you, Isabella. He'll understand it's just strategy. But Ricardo didn't understand. When I told him about Gabriel and the real reason for the will, he exploded in fury. You're choosing a manual laborer over me. He grabbed my arms too forcefully. Over the man your family chose for you. You don't understand, Ricardo. Miguel isn't. Isn't what? Isn't poor. Isn't an opportunist. His eyes shone with anger. You think I'm going to accept being replaced by a farmhand? I tried to pull away, but he gripped tighter. Ricardo, you're hurting me. Not as much as you're hurting me. His voice became dangerously low. Isabella, you're going to marry me. Not him. And if you have to choose between your inheritance and your real future, I hope you're smart. When I finally managed to leave that encounter, I had purple marks on my arms and crystal clear certainty in my heart. I had never loved Ricardo. I had just accepted what my family decided for me. Miguel, on the other hand, was a choice, my first real choice. Chapter 7, The Decision. 10 days remained until the will's deadline when Miguel came to me with a proposal that would change everything. "Isabella, I need to tell you something important," he said, finding me in the main house garden. "About why I really accepted your father's condition." My heart contracted. More secrets. "I didn't accept just because of Gabriel or to protect you." He held my hands, looking directly into my eyes. "I accepted because I was already in love with you for 2 years." "What?" "Since the first day I saw you, coming back from university on vacation. You were in the sunflower field, reading a book under the big tree. You were wearing a yellow dress and laughing at something you had read." He smiled, lost in the memory. "I asked your father who that young woman was, and he said, 'That's my daughter Isabella. The most precious thing I have in the world.'" Tears began to roll down my face. I remembered that day. I was reading 100 Years of Solitude, and had reached a particularly absurd part. Eduardo noticed my feelings long before I admitted them to myself. That's why he created this condition in the will. Not just to give me the inheritance, but to give us a chance. "Miguel. But I can't accept you marrying me just out of obligation. If you don't love me, if you're doing this just for the inheritance or pressure, I'll leave. I'll renounce the inheritance and disappear from your life." I looked at this extraordinary man, who had carried love for my dead brother, who had protected me without my knowing, who had fallen in love with me from afar and respected my life without ever interfering. And I knew, with absolute certainty, what my answer was. "Miguel Santos," I said, holding his face with both hands, "I love you. Not because of the inheritance, not because of Gabriel, not because of Dad. I love you because you are kind where others are rude, honest where others lie, brave where others hide." He kissed me right there, in the garden where he had first seen me, under the tree where I used to read. It was a kiss that carried 2 years of waiting, months of discoveries, weeks of growing passion. "So you accept marrying me?" "For love, not obligation." "I accept," I replied, "but first I need to do some things." Chapter 8, Settling Accounts. The breakup with Ricardo was more dramatic than I expected. He not only refused to accept my decision, but also threatened to ruin Miguel and expose this whole farce. "You're going to regret this, Isabella," he said, leaving the main house after a terrible argument. "You're going to regret choosing this nobody over me." With Mom, the conversation was different, sadder than angry. "I don't understand you, daughter," she said, sitting in the armchair in what had been Dad's room. "You had everything in life, all opportunities, the best suitor, and you choose to throw yourself away for a worker. Mom, Miguel is a trained engineer, manages $1 million property, and has no name, no traditional family, no social position." She shook her head, tired. "Your father was always stubborn, but doing this after death, it's the last insult." "Maybe Dad knew something we didn't know," I suggested gently. "Your father knew how to be cruel," she replied, bitter. "He always knew." That's when I understood that Mom knew about Gabriel. Always knew. And had chosen to forget, pretend he never existed, instead of fighting for her sick son. "You knew about Gabriel, it wasn't a question." Lidisha closed her eyes, aging 10 years in a second. Gabriel was imperfect. I couldn't look at him without feeling guilty. As if it were my fault he was born that way. "So you agreed to give him up for adoption?" "I agreed to let your father decide. And he decided it would be better for everyone if Gabriel wasn't part of our lives." She opened her eyes, and I saw tears. Maybe it was better. Gabriel was happy with the Santos family. I would have made his life hell. For the first time in my life, I felt sorry for my mother. Sorry for the woman who had chosen appearance over truth, comfort over love. Chapter 9, The Wedding. We married in a simple ceremony at the town church, 5 days before the will's deadline. I wore my grandmother's wedding dress, which had been stored in mothballs for decades. Miguel wore a suit borrowed from his best friend. Mom didn't attend. Ricardo didn't either. In fact, he had left town 2 days before, promising to never return. But it was okay. The farm workers were there, Dr. Enrique was there as a witness, and some of Miguel's friends who traveled for the ceremony. But the most emotional moment was when Miguel placed a second ring on my finger, a simple silver ring, very small. "It was Gabriel's," he whispered. "He asked me to give it to you on your wedding day. He said that even though he couldn't be present, he wanted to be part of the most important moment of your life." I cried so much I smeared all my makeup, but I didn't care. For the first time, I felt that Gabriel was really there, present, connecting our family in a way that not even death had managed to break. Chapter 10, The Last Revelation. 2 weeks after the wedding, when we were still getting used to life as newlyweds in the main house, Mom had moved to the city house. Dr. Enrique appeared with a final surprise. "There's something else in the will," he said, sitting in the room where it all began. "A last clause that Eduardo asked me to reveal only after the marriage." Miguel and I exchanged worried glances. "More surprises?" "Eduardo left a letter. For both of you." He handed us a sealed envelope with Dad's familiar handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened the letter and read aloud. Asterisk, "My dear Isabella and Miguel. If you are reading this, it means you followed your heart despite all difficulties. Isabella, my beloved daughter, I ask forgiveness for all the times I was too harsh, too distant, too demanding. You were always perfect exactly as you are, and I regret not saying this while I was alive. Miguel, my adoptive son of the heart, thank you for keeping the promise you made to Gabriel. Thank you for loving my daughter the way she deserves to be loved. Thank you for helping me understand that family is not just blood, but choice. The truth is that the will was a test, but not for you. It was a test for myself. To see if I had the courage to fix past mistakes, to unite what should never have been separated. Isabella, you are inheriting not just a farm, but a complete family. Miguel is not just your husband, he's your brother of the heart, the connection to Gabriel you never had the chance to know. And there's one more thing. In the old house in the attic, there's a trunk with all of Gabriel's things that I kept during these years. Letters he wrote to you, Isabella. Drawings he made imagining how you would be together. Birthday gifts he bought but never could give. Gabriel knew he was dying, but spent the last months of his life planning how to unite you two. It was his idea for Miguel to come work on the farm. It was his idea for me to include a marriage clause in the will. My sick son spent his last days creating a plan to ensure his sister would be happy. So when you go to the attic and find his letters, remember, this marriage wasn't my arrangement. It was Gabriel's gift. Be happy. Love each other. And sometimes, remember me with affection, despite all my flaws. With eternal love. Eduardo Santana, and Gabriel Santana, who lives in our hearts, asterisk. Epilogue, The Attic of Dreams. We went up to the attic of the old house that same afternoon, hand in hand, ready for another discovery. The trunk was there, exactly where Dad had said, covered by a crocheted blanket I recognized as my grandmother's work. Inside, we found Gabriel's treasures, dozens of letters addressed to my sister Isabella, drawings of the three of us together. He had imagined what our complete family would be like. Simple gifts but full of love, a colorful bead necklace, a book of poetry, a rag doll he had asked his adoptive mother to make. But the most precious discovery was a diary, where Gabriel had written his last thoughts. Asterisk, Miguel promises to take care of Isabella for me. He doesn't know yet, but he's in love with her. I see how he looks at the photos that Papa Eduardo shows me. I see how happy he gets when Papa tells stories about her. I hope they marry and are happy. I hope they have children and tell them about Uncle Gabriel who loved them before they were even born. I hope that one day, when they kiss under the garden tree, they remember it was a brother's love that brought them to each other. I will die in peace knowing I'm not leaving Isabella alone. I'm leaving her with the best person I know. Asterisk. We cried together in that dusty attic, Miguel and I, holding the memories of a brother I never knew but who had completely changed my life. Gabriel had been the Cupid of our story, the guardian angel who worked behind the scenes to ensure our happy ending. 6 months later, when I discovered I was pregnant, I had no doubts about the name. If it was a boy, he would be called Gabriel. If it was a girl, Gabriella. It was our way of bringing back to the family the brother who should never have been separated from us. Today, 3 years later, as I watch Miguel teaching our son Gabriel to walk among the coffee plantations our father loved so much, I understand that some inheritances cannot be measured in money. The greatest inheritance I received wasn't the farm or material goods. It was love, the love of a repentant father who found courage to fix his mistakes, the love of a brother who orchestrated our happiness from beyond, and the love of a man who chose me long before I had the courage to choose him. Santa Clara Farm continues to prosper, now managed by Miguel with the wisdom Dad recognized in him. Mom finally accepted our union and is a loving grandmother, although she still makes occasional comments about what people will think. And sometimes, when the wind sways the branches of the big tree in the garden, I swear I can feel Gabriel there, smiling, satisfied with a job well done. Because in the end, I discovered that true love is not just about finding the right person. It's about allowing that person to transform you, to challenge you, to make you want to be better. It's about building something together that is greater than the sum of its parts. Miguel gave me a family I didn't know I had lost. I gave him the home he had always searched for. And Gabriel, our invisible angel, gave us the chance to find each other. Some inheritances, I discovered, are more valuable than all the gold in the world. And some are received not when someone dies, but when someone decides to live, truly live for love. The end. A story about second chances, about how love can heal old wounds, and about how sometimes angels work through the people we least expect.